All right. So let's see. Today's demo. Today is September 30th, 2016. Today's demo is about glazing. Yay, we're finally here. So full color and glazing is basically using the paint in sort of a transparent fashion. Some paints you can actually glaze with all of your paints, but some of them are better than others to glaze with. So a lot of you are starting to, some of you have brand new color palettes, so that you haven't really set this up, but I want to show you how I set my palette up, because you're going to start putting colors out. And this is sort of like your keyboard, right? Like if you've got a piano or something, you've got a keyboard here of colors. And really, whatever you do, whether you put your white here or over here or around, just make sure you do it the same way every time, because after years of having my palette like this, I don't have to think twice about to go here to reach my alizarin crimson, or to reach over here for my yellow, or over here for my black. I just automatically do it. Just like if you play the piano, you can play with your eyes closed, right? You know where to reach for those keys, those colors. So like on here, you can, so keep it consistent. So what I do is I generally put my palette out like my color wheel. And you notice that we talk about values, and we talk about colors are actual values too. So I start with the white over here on the left corner, and then I just rotate in a way sort of around the color wheel from light to dark, and sort of from warm to cool, though we already know that all colors can be warm and cool depending on what they're next to, but just for this purpose here. So I've got white, and then I go with my Hansa or lemon yellow. That's sort of that light yellow is your cool temperature yellow. The next one over here is going to be my cadmium yellow, or my cad medium yellow. That's going to be your warm yellow. And then you get into your red. You've got your cad red light, which is your warm red, and then mine kind of skips here. You could put yours next, and then you've got your cool red, which is the alizarin crimson, the dark red. And then you put your two blues. I put my ultramarine blue, and then my phthalo blue, and then a black, maybe down here in this corner. Mine's a little bit more up here. But I've got a few other places where, like I've got a place here where I put my burnt sienna. You guys have burnt sienna in your group. Burnt sienna is a great, we call modifier color, where it can sort of tweak colors in different ways. It's sort of a earth tone, kind of a brown color. So that's how I set my palette up.
Are those all dry on there?
Where do you put yellow ochre?
So I generally put, you can see where I have put yellow ochre. And yellow ochre, I used to use it as a cool yellow, but there's sort of a debate. Some people think that the yellow ochre is a little more warm in temperature. I was sort of taught years ago that it was the cool form of yellow, but I used to put it there. But now, with my new palette that I've been working, I sort of leave the yellow ochre over by the burnt umber, because I kind of use it more now as sort of a modifier. And I don't know if I'll get enough of this paint up that you'll be able to see. I apologize. I probably should have stuck these out before we started, but we're doing it now. And when you're glazing, you really don't need a whole lot of paint out. but I'm putting out quite a bit, just in case I need it. Okay, so there's my paints I just squirted out. All right, so the next thing we need is your medium. So when you glaze, you're going to use your medium. You're going to use your liquid, or this is the alkyd glazing medium from Utrecht.
The liquid is the same thing.
Liquid. Yep. And I'm going to be using a little bit of that. So, all right. So the first thing we do is we look up here, and I can see. You know, I'm going to. Gosh, that some of this is still kind of wet. I'm not sure I want to. Thank you. I think I'm going to. I've glazed this one several times and then I wipe it back out. This is similar to what's going on up there. Let's use this for. So I'm just going to show you a few things here. Before we even get to color, we can try glazing. Well, let's do this. Before we get to all the color, if you look up there on the subject that we're looking at, you'll see that this is sort of a warmish tone. You may not be a particular color, but it's sort of a warm tone, right? Up there. You can't really see it here. This is just gray, it's just black and white. So we can change the temperature a little bit. And this is going to be where I'm going to use my modifier. I think one of my favorite paints to glaze with is the burnt sienna. So this is so I'm going to touch the corner of my brush just a little bit, and I'm going to pull some medium down. So you're going to see that what I'm doing here is I'm mixing up mostly medium with a little bit of color. So you see that's the glaze is very transparent, and if I put it up here on my board,
And you're saying this is warm because of the kind of light that's on it, or?
well, what I see on the subject matter up there,
Yeah.
that's a really warm light. That's a very much of an incandescent light. So because we talked a little bit about temperature, I can, and I didn't really put. That's not very much. That's really not very much colors, but I glazed that on there. You can see how it changed that, how it sort of warmed everything up. Now, there's probably some areas here where. You hold that for a minute. That you can wipe back where you don't want it. And you notice instead of trying to fiddle with, going like this, I just went over the whole thing. And so I want to keep the warm of the surface, and I'm going to wipe back the glaze off of what I don't want for now. It's interesting to see how gray those really look when it's next to that warm.
Why are you deciding to remove from certain areas?
Well, because the first pass is I just wanted that tabletop to be a little more warm like what I'm seeing. And I'll come back into this because I can see some of that. And there's some reflected lights in here that I can see that are color. So it doesn't matter too much about which one to start with. Thanks. let's start with that. Let's try that apple. And by the way, notice the brush I'm using. This is where you get to use your 2-inch wide brush. That's what you're going to use for glazing. I've got a couple here just because I don't have to go between them. So the color of the apple, the cool thing about glazing is you've already figured out what when you painted this last week. What's all figured out up here? All the values. So technically then, if I were to take, and I'm choosing between, well, what do you guys think? Do you think the color of that apple there is my is my red light, or would it be more kind of the alizarin crimson, that darker red?
Crimson.
I see that darker red up there. We'll probably come into the red a little bit and mix it up, but let's just try some pure alizarin. And again, I'm just pulling a little bit of color. Alizarin is completely a transparent paint. You can read on some of the tubes it will say on the back, sometimes it will. Burnt sienna, on the other hand, is a semi-transparent. White would be, this titanium white is opaque. Your lighter cad colors are more opaque, but you can still glaze with them. Opaque meaning you can't really see through them. So if I glaze this, and I just go right over top the whole thing.
Wow, that's like magic.
Yes, it is. It's really fun too.
Illusion
And
is
so it's
too.
really, you have a lot of medium, so, sorry. So the more medium, the better, so it's.
Well, the more medium, the more see-through it is. See, now if I put more paint on, I'm beefing up the color, but see how I'm covering up the value underneath. Still not too bad, but you'll play with it, and you'll see that there's a little bit where you got to decide between a little more medium, maybe a little less medium. So it may not be exactly what I'm seeing up there, but it's closer, right? So I'm just going to glaze all of these with the basic main color that I see.
So you went outside the line, what are you gonna do about that?
Worried about that already. That could be a worry. Well, and in a sense, you know, there's a couple of things you could do, because the thing about glazing, I think with glazing is it's probably the most kind of forgiving form of putting color on, because you can just go back and clean it around. Now you'll probably be pulling a little bit of the and I don't mind a little halation there of some of the red. I don't mind it.
It's amazing to me, after you put the red on the apple, how much it detracted from the warmth of the burnt sienna that you put on the white. Because
Yeah.
that apple is just so bright with color.
Yeah, well, and nothing else is in color.
Right?
It's like those old 7-Up commercials, remember? Where they had the little product and the red and everything was black and white. Kind of using that as a, photographers use that. So I'm wiping this out. Now, when you glaze, if you only have a couple of those brushes, this is where you really need to kind of clean your brushes out. And you might need to use a little bit of your Gamsol. So now I'm going to go over here. So what color is the grapefruit?
Ooh, that's an orangey color. There's some red in it too, though.
The main color, though, would be orange. So the question, though, is to get that, which yellow and which red do I mix? Should I mix this one and this one?
Yeah.
Or maybe this one and this one? Or maybe they're all going to be very different, you know?
Is it, my mind thinks, is it more towards the red
This
side
one.
of orange? So if it's not in your mind, then I would go with the alizarin, or not the alizarin, the other one.
Let's just see what happens when I put this. So I'm going into the cad yellow, and I'm just mixing it into some of the, since I already had it there, let's just try it. You'll get different oranges. That's the thing. When I get into color mixing, you're going to see a lot more of this, but you'll get into one of the reasons why I'm going into this red is because it's a little more transparent. If it still gives me the color of orange that I need and still being transparent. Gosh, you guys are going, that's too easy. Pretty cool, huh? And the values are still there. And see, it's interesting because what's underneath it kind of kills the orange or the color.
We did all the hard stuff last week.
Values, where it's all at, right? I'm just sort of decorating them now. Right? Kind of reminds me of the back when they didn't have color photography, but people would colorize black and white, and you could see how they were colorized. They would use different paints or whatnot.
In my senior picture, I got to choose what color I wanted in the sweater.
Really?
Yeah.
Cool.
Is that-
All right. So we don't have a green pear up there, but this is a green pear. So how do you make green? Yeah, we all know that blue and yellow, but which blue and yellow, right? Well, let's just try this because we've already tried it, and I'm going to get some medium. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Which, if I use the phthalo, I already know the phthalo has a little more yellow in it. It's going to be really green, and you'll come to find out that the ultramarine blue has a little more red in it. It's more purpley. And what is red to green on the color wheel?
It's complement.
It's complement. So what does red do to green?
Makes it look dark.
It kills the green of the color. And that might be what we need. Maybe just a little bit of a kind of a more gray green. Oh, let's get a little more. See, I thought, hey, that's a little bit. Do you see how the opacity is sort of covering, kind of ghosting over top? It's kind of lightening up. Maybe, Jessica, you'll like this because maybe this will lighten up all of your... You thought your paintings were a little too dark. That kind of works, right? That'll work for now. And then what I like to do is I like to bring those highlights back. I don't have my little Q-tips here, but
You want some
This is-
tips?
yeah, sure, if you got a couple. This is where I like to pull the little highlights out. Oh man, I'm getting glare. There we go.
Pass those up, please.
Thank you. Whoops. Oh yes. Get one more. Thank you, Joe.
There.
What did somebody say back here?
The palette, when you were coloring the glare on it up there, it was hard to see the green.
Okay. So we've got the basic colors in with their values. Now, what about the cast shadows? What did we learn about warm light and then conversely the cast shadow from a warm light? What did we learn? Yeah, so just for fun, there's so many ways you could glaze. So let's go into our medium. I'm going into some clean areas here, and let's take a little, is that my, yes. Oh, what the heck, let's take a little bit of both. See, look at that phthalo blue, man, it's powerful. But you know what? My cast shadows are a little too dark, so guess what I could actually do? Guess what I could actually add to it, even though I'm glazing. Oh yes, it's still good. My white didn't dry from last week. We can try it and see what happens. Now you may not pick this up too much, but I'm going to add just a tiny bit of white to that glaze mixture. I'm going to just lighten it up just very small. bit. Oh man, probably put a lot in there. That's all right, you can always go back and get more medium. This is where your clean brushes work well. Oh, get in the picture there, Rob. There you go. Okay, so I'm going to go up here. Especially right there, I thought that was a little dark. Is that picking up? Can you see the blue up there?
More so on the apple.
Ah, that's looking fantastic. At least from here, they look a lot more like shadows, and I thought, what the heck, just put this one up here because maybe just to cool that off just a little bit. I could come back. All right, so now we've got the shadows a little more, kind of cooled them down a little bit in the temperature, and has a, boy, it's changed since we started, hasn't it? I'm not spending too much time yet. How about some of those reflected lights? Gosh, there's a really cool kind of reflected light coming up from this apple. And another some of these brushes that are really good to glaze are your small sables. If you have little areas to glaze, well, let's go back up to the apple here for a minute, because you'll have to forgive me. The one I'm glazing on is not exactly that, because the light source is on this is coming from the opposite direction, but it's all the same, you'll see. So I'm going to add a little bit of now the red light and a little bit mixture, and I'm keeping this in that kind of glaze. I don't want to get it too thick. We were talking about thick paint earlier. This is really thin. We're doing this technique really thin. And I want to make the apple, and I'm going to add just a touch of the white. I'm going to go right over top of that because I know I can. So now I'm just mixing a little bit of the white into it, still keeping it sort of a glaze. It's a little less opaque, but the light side of the apple, remember, is a little more of that kind of red color. And I can bring that up, and I'm just going to get right into that red. I'm going to try right into the halftone, see if I can just put a spot of pure red. Remember I talked about the real red of the apple is happening in that halftone area? I just make that really come alive in the halftone. All right, you can always, and the nice thing about pulling out the highlight is there's a tinge of that red that's left there, so it kind of goes with the family of that. Let's go up the side of this. There's a bit of reflected light on here from the red, and that's just really subtle, so that's probably just a little tiny bit of color with some more medium. This is the week that you're going to probably use most of more medium. See, there's just a bit of the red casting up a reflected red light. Isn't that nice how that ties that in? I'll even pull the red right into it like this. Ooh, that's nice. How fun is that, right? That's kind of cool. And sometimes we'll...
What is the purpose of the glazing besides adding the color?
What is the purpose of it?
Yeah. I don't understand that. I thought glazing, when it, after your painting was all done, you just glaze over the top of it. That's what I understood glazing to be. So I don't understand what you're doing. I'm sorry.
When you're saying that you always thought you understood the glazing to be, you glazed, what would you glaze over top of it with when you're done with the
Oh,
paint?
you mean like a clear glaze?
Like a clear glaze?
Clear glaze.
A layer.
That's a glaze too. That's like a clear coat which you would put on to protect your painting. Or it might, some glazes that are more, some glazes have sort of a higher shine or a sheen glossy effect so that it kind of pulls out the dead areas of your painting, that clear glaze that you talk about. But this one's coloring. I mean, we're coloring with the glaze.
To add the color to whatever we have.
Yeah. And in a way, it's really quite beautiful where we've kind of set up the values already, and we can push these glazes around. Now, look at this right here. You could get into little subtleties because right here, there may be a little bit of reflected light coming up here. So if I pull back some of the, look how warm that looks. Now remember, everything is relative, right? Value, color, temperature. Remember how this was cool? This whole area, that was cool before I started, right? But now look how this area here, is the camera picking that up? Look how warm that is compared to that. That's a good point where a relatively cool area becomes warmer because I made this a little cooler with that blue glaze, right?
So if you do a whole picture and maybe you're not real pleased with, you think it just is too cool, you'd like to warm it up a bit, you use your glaze.
Yeah. I've saved many a painting with what I'm doing right now. I'm really showing you and later on I'll show you how to glaze on top of a fully colored finished painting to beef it, to push it, the colors, or to bring down the colors, or to push it this way or that way. It's such a great way to come in, and if I could maybe I'll bring in a painting I'm working on in my studio with these big landscapes I do. I'll work on them for a while, then I'll glaze it, and I'll let it dry, then I'll work on it more with paint, and I'll glaze it. I'll go about 4 or 5 or 6 layers of that painting and glazing back and forth until I get just what I want, and there's just a real
Is it true
interesting.
that you-
What's that?
I'm sorry. I'm drowning on my blueberry.
Don't try.
Is it true that you're also creating more and more depth in that glow effect as you're adding those layers?
I think there is some kind of that depth, yes. It's kind of a richness, I would say, kind of a depth of richness. And I don't know, it's sometimes you could get more of this sort of 3-dimension and the depth and the feeling of life. It's more lifelike. Sometimes paintings can become a little sort of kind of overly worked or chalky, and sometimes the glazes will bring the life back into them, or bring the light of, right? What we're really after is replicating light, right? What light does, and we're using pigments of paint. So you get the idea, right?
Same effect.
I'm sorry?
Do you think you get the same effect if you were to paint this straight with color to begin with, as opposed to glazing with color?
You'll get a different effect. It's just different. It won't be necessarily better or worse. You'll get a different effect. This has got an effect that's interesting, and it's got kind of this kind of what those Dutch paintings look like up at the museum. It's kind of in the sense what they were doing. Okay, I'm going to lighten this pear up a little bit. So I just want you to see sometimes you can be very careful with the white. Don't use too much because you don't want to make everything completely opacity. But if we wanted to lighten this up a little bit around where this highlight is, you see I can lighten that up, and I just used a little more yellow and a tiny bit of white.
That's awesome.
So that's really, now there's the lighter side, and I really like this area here that
That's because of the yellow, that's also giving you a little bit more warmth.
A little more warmth. And the yellow, you'll start to learn, is some colors you can key up the values. Because yellow, if I don't run a really key up with white, and if the color mixture is correct, I could key up with maybe a lighter color, like say a yellow, or. And if sometimes I want to darken an area rather than use black, sometimes I'll use like ultramarine blue and maybe alizarin crimson with the color if the mixtures are right. And I'll talk more about that as we talk more about mixing colors a little later. I'm just going to try bringing up that apple just a little bit more. Adding just a little bit more color, a little less medium. Let's see what happens. I just want to do it right around here where I can get some of that color.
That looks very cheery.
It's looking in the light spot, looking like that classic auto color candy apple red.
That's what the glazes can do. They're really. But I'm covering up some of the underneath, but it's still showing through enough to reveal the value,
Right.
to reveal the form. And even if I kind of kill that too much, even if I get away from that too much, I can always come back and add, little bits of, oh, let's do that.
Because that's your midtone.
That's your midtone. That's where I'm going to make that a little bit more. That's where it's really orange, right?
Was that a happy accident?
Yeah, kind of. Isn't that beautiful? Now I want to make I'm going to go and make the orange side of that just a little lighter because that's a really nice. So now I'm going to mix the orange just up a little lighter. Keep my medium in there. I don't want to make it too opaque. All right. There it is. You see how I can. You mix white with anything, what's it going to do to the color?
It's going to kill it a little.
It's going to kill it. It's going to kill it a little bit. So see how it's coming to life? It's really, and I'm going to leave what I've got there for part of my midtone, that sort of gray turns away. And notice how, see, and this is the other thing, when you keep working with these colors, this is, what temperature of this is this color that I'm putting on right now? It's very warm, right? And look what it's doing to the shadow. Look how much more cool the shadow looks. But now, because I like to keep wiping back these highlights. But now we've got some reflected lights coming up in here. So let's finish off with those. And that's going to be really kind of intense, but just a little bit of it.
You're just using the same mixture at the top too?
Yeah, well, no, because that's way too light. I went and a little bit darker. Remember the reflected lights.
So no white on the reflective.
There's probably a little bit in here, but remember that. So I warmed that up, you see, and I kept that. And if I wanted to bring back maybe the coarse shadow, maybe I covered it too much. I'll take one of these Q-tips, clean, thank you, and then you can wipe back to the dark. See how I'm bringing up the coarse shadow again by wiping away what I covered it up with. So that's getting a little darker there. That sort of cooling effect. That's nice. Let's do it over here a little bit too. All right.
You need your highlight back in the apple.
Yeah, let's put that back in the apple, and it's always there. And now we're getting kind of a nice glaze over top of that highlight.
The color that stays from removing from the highlight just adds so much to the convincing of it all.
Yeah.
It's really subtle, but it's still.
Very subtle. And look at this is going to, in this shadow here, we're going to get a little bit of, this is what I really love, is these objects are throwing color around. So what this is doing, see, I can add a little bit of that orange is throwing back onto that even in the shadow. And so see how this kind of ties it all together into that object. And look at how beautiful now this sort of reddish, this sort of blue against this really brings up the values of those things. And to really show you what we've done, if I erase away an area here, you'll see where it was. Okay, so all right, so you get the idea. So there's the let's put it up here so we can see it for a little bit. It's really hard, everything's backwards. Really funny. It's like the lagoon, weird moon, mirror, fun house. All right, so there's that. Now, the last thing I want to show you is that remember when you were saying about how things must have been so drab? Well, now that we've seen this, I want you to see the difference when we don't have it.
Oh, no.
So I'm going to have to use this another time. So if you want to do it again, then you can just wipe it all away and do it again. Let's do half of the orange. That's kind of fun to see. I think it's kind of fun to see a half of it done and half of it not done.
Oh, that kills me. And I'm dying inside right now.
You like that? And then if you want to just, now that's kind of cool. So you can see the difference in where we started and where we ended off.
Hey, Andy Warhol has nothing on that painting.
What's that? Ooh, look how beautiful that looks. That's I should have stopped. Should have sold it for thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
I had a teacher that would wipe away your painting, some of it, and he would say, if you did it, you could do it again. Do it again.
You know what? If he's doing that, I have a story to. Did I tell you guys about my Earl Jones story in the eyeball? Did I tell you about that? Let me tell you real quick. So, I used to go to a place up here on 1700 South. Earl Jones is a wonderful Utah painter. A little older now. I don't think he's painting anymore, but every Saturday we'd go over there. People could come to an open model session. We would do the figure or portrait. He would kind of help people that were there. It wasn't particularly a class, but it was kind of more of an open session. But we had a model there, and I was painting the portrait when I was used to love to go there every week. And I was working on this portrait, and he noticed that I had been working on one of the eyes for a long time, like about 20 or 30 minutes. And I was just trying to get it perfect, and I wasn't considering all the other places. And I was working on this eye, and I'm like, okay, yeah, that's getting there. And he came behind me, and he kind of looked at it, and he says, He says, it's completely wrong in the way that that it's not in the right location. So he took his thumb and he went, now do it again. And that was really a challenge for me to not go crazy. But you know, for about a while, you know, months, I was really sad about that. I was, you know, offended, and I didn't really say anything to him. But about 2 or 3 years later, I finally got it. It was actually what he did was actually a compliment to me, because I realized that he wouldn't have done that if he didn't know I could have done it again. So he had enough confidence in me, and so I look at that as a compliment. He knew that I was to do it again. So if you did it once, you can do it again. That's where you're really starting to do something, and you have that confidence.
But he said you had it in the wrong place.
I don't even remember what he says. He just says it wasn't right. I just remember his thumb going across like that. Stab me in the back too. Go for it.
Dial a bit up.
Anyway, okay, there you go, guys. The show is on. Yay, color.
You use burnt sienna to get the warm.
Yeah, I love burnt sienna for warming things up.
I have to clean my homework. It's drier than